Yellow tape wrapped around a Toronto neighborhood last week, marking yet another scene of gun violence, this one taking the life of a 22-year-old man.
There appears to be more prevalence of firearms in the city. We are arresting people quite often. I mean, we've seized over 800 guns.
Numbers from the Toronto Police Service show more than 700 people have been shot in the last year, and overall, a 16% increase in shooting incidents over the previous year, a trend steadily increasing over the last 5 years.
Gun violence is any violence committed with the use of firearms. Gun violence has a long history of issues with the criminal world. Gang members, mafias, and other criminally affiliated individuals use guns to gain what they want illegally. Whether it's thefts, robberies, shootings, or murders, these criminals use guns to get their way. For years, the government has been trying to crack down on firearms and stop these issues while it grows. Gun violence threatens human life and the right to live. In Toronto specifically, gun violence is a growing issue, with numbers growing each year. In the US, they have the right to bear arms, but here in Canada, it's easier for the government to legislate control. However, even with this known fact, gun violence is still growing in Toronto and access to legal firearms is still rising. While non-affiliated and upstanding citizens have to go through background checks and wait weeks to buy firearms for the use of self-defense, these criminals have relative ease in accessing these firearms. Whether legal or illegal, easy access to weapons is one of the driving and growth factors of gun violence. Gun violence is simply a large issue that needs to be stopped. Gun violence has been an issue in Toronto for the past 3 decades. Before 1991, gun violence in Toronto did not compare to some major cities in the States. Cities like New York and Baltimore were slowly being infested with unnecessary violence due to guns. It all started with the arrival of easy-to-access guns, drugs, and gangs. What really sparked gun violence was Mike Harris and his common sense revolution. The policies he set in place cut social assistance and shut down many community support programs to overcome poverty.
And his common sense revolution. That is the Tory election platform in a nutshell. A revolution of deep tax cuts and deeper spending cuts. Does it mark a sharp move to the right, away from the center of the political spectrum in Ontario?
What's changed is we've had 10 years, the period we call the lost decade, of some 65 new tax increases, massive buildup in government spending, a significant intervention by government into the marketplace. And so what needs to happen now is to restore the balance that Bill Davis had throughout that period of time. We do need a correction from this politics of the past 10 years. We need major change to get Ontario back on track.
Many residents thrived with their reclaimed tax dollars, but the policy did more harm than expected to those who relied on support programs. Slowly but surely, gun violence in the city started to rise. By the end of 2005, there were 52 gun-related deaths across the city. It wasn't a big secret who was doing the shooting and the killing. It was young men who grew up in poverty under Mike Harris's policies. These young men were nicknamed Mike's Kids. By 2009, programs were set to drag kids away from gang activity, but the programs were not effective. These are statistics showing the rise of gun violence over the last 1.5 decades. In Toronto, the shootings have been growing continuously since 2004. In 2004, there were a total of 191 shootings in the city and 112 injured or killed. In 2020, there were a total of 462 shootings and 217 injured or killed. The worst year for the city of Toronto was in 2019, when the total shootings was 492 and 284 people injured or killed. Clearly, with these statistics, we see the numbers of shootings and injuries increasing with no consistent and good backdrop like the government is promising. We interviewed an officer of the law regarding gun violence in Toronto. These were his answers for the questions we asked.
Good evening, sir. How's it going?
Not bad, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. Before we start off, what should I address you as?
You can just call me Officer Patel.
Okay, Officer Patel. I just have a few questions for you about gun violence. Are you ready to start off?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. First question is, what is your take on gun violence in Toronto?
I would say gun violence in Toronto is for sure a really big issue. An issue that, as a city, we need to come together and try to solve this. But it's been growing for the past couple of years, it's been hard to keep track. A lot of homicides. The homicide rate's been growing every year. It's getting harder and harder for us to control it as a department. But and the new wave of Toronto music and Toronto hip hop, it just glorifies the whole scene and glorifies everything about it. So that surely doesn't help. But hopefully, the city and police department work together and come with new guidelines to maybe make them more strict.
Okay. Next question. What was your experience like with gun violence?
Personally, I've never dealt with gun violence myself. Just within my department, there has been a lot of cases, but I guess I would say I've been fortunate enough not to deal with anything firsthand. But from what I've heard and what I've seen, it's really hard to keep track of and really hard to stay on top of everything. It's like one case would be solved and another would just start. A lot of homicides everywhere in neighborhoods with a lot of kids and families, and it's just really getting hard to control.
Here are some of the citizens' thoughts of gun violence right now.
Speaking about how there's been 8 shootings in roughly the past month. We know that a fellow by the name of John Wheeler was killed right in the alcove over there about 2-3 weeks ago.
John.
I mean, how does it make you feel? I hate
that hurts my heart. John was an amazing guy who cared for everybody and was just doing his own thing and going to work like a hardworking man, and these senseless children just it sickens me. It really.
The violence needs to stop. It needs to stop. We have young kids growing up in the area. It's a beautiful area to live in. You know, up until a couple of weeks we felt really safe here, but not anymore. Please stop the shooting. The violence needs to stop. For the future of the little ones, please stop. Whoever's doing it, stop, please.
It's a 12-year-old boy. He didn't do nothing wrong. He's just walking down the street having a nice time with his mom, and then this happened. He didn't deserve it. Gun violence needs to stop, you know?
We interviewed a former gang member, and these were his answers he gave us to our questions.
What is your take on gun violence in Toronto?
So gun violence in Toronto, especially with gangs, definitely a serious issue. Many gangs in Toronto have guns and aren't afraid to use them, really. It's a big issue.
Next question. What was your experience like with gun violence?
So when I used to be part of this gang, basically everyone in the gang had a gun. So seeing a man holding a gun was nothing like different. It was just an everyday thing. And I even seen people getting shot in real life, and it's a tragic thing, you know.
In your opinion, how hard is it to buy guns illegally in Toronto?
So if you're part of a gang, especially a big gang in Toronto, it's not very hard buying a gun at all. It's definitely harder than the US, as their gun laws are softer, but a man can get a gun in Toronto, no issue.
And if you don't mind me asking, how did you obtain your firearm?
So personally, I obtained my firearm from a gang member who was in my gang. He has a higher rank than me. I don't know where he got it from, but all I know is that the man distributes the products, and that's all I need, you know.
We interviewed a victim of gun violence, and these were his answers he gave us to our questions.
What is your take on gun violence in Toronto?
Gun violence has been a thing that's like going around Toronto a lot. You see a lot of like innocent victims getting hurt from gun violence, like left and right, like even bystanders. And I was like amongst one of those victims.
And what was your experience like with the gun violence, right? So if you don't mind sharing, how did you get shot?
I was actually just coming off the bus one time, and I was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Did you have any PTSD with gun violence in Toronto? If so, how did it affect you?
As I've previously said, like it made me like be a lot more cautious and like nervous while leaving my house. Especially like I'm a lot more nervous when like meeting other people like that I might not know or going to places that I'm not familiar with.
The Toronto hip-hop scene may be the largest and most popular music scene in Canada, birthing many popular artists such as The Weeknd, Nav, and one of the largest rappers in the world right now, Drake. These artists paved the way for many of the up-and-coming rappers out of Toronto we see today, artists such as Lil Brett, Killy, and Top 5. These artists have bright futures and are growing exponentially, but still have ways to go and are still not at the top of their career. These artists may become as big as the few mentioned before. Sadly, other rappers such as Smoke Dogg and Houdini have been victims of gun violence in the city of Toronto. Sadly, they passed away without reaching their full potential. Smoke Dogg was a rapper out of Regent Park, a hood in downtown Toronto. He has many songs with over 100,000 views on YouTube, and he also went on tour with Drake.
If I want it, I get it. Straight to the top where I'm headed. I'm the MVP of this shit. You just an honorable man.
In the summer of 2018, Smoke Dogg was unfortunately shot and killed in broad daylight in the middle of downtown. This was a major loss for the Toronto music scene. He was shot and killed by a gang member from the area of Jane and Finch. Houdini, who is a rapper from Jane and Finch, was also shot and killed.
He got his shit snatched, never even had the strength to get it back. Serving the riff, rap, lava trap, but you know I'm still in that. Talking about big racks, look how long it took you to rinse a pack. Gonna claim tell, aren't you sad? I saw more dope than your dad. White people saying I'm rad. Ops gonna look cause they mad. Feel like my jack, are you bad?
He was shot at a memorial held for another rapper who was also a victim of gun violence. In this simple example, you can see the never-ending circle of gun violence and how it really is around our city. Nav, one of the previous big names in the rap industry that we've mentioned, said he would co-sign this up-and-coming rapper into this label XO.
After watching all these videos, the rapper who gets my co-sign is Houdini, just because he's probably the only one out of these videos that I have one of his songs in my rotation, and I just like his style and everything's dope.
Rather than becoming a big name, he became just another tragedy and victim of gun violence.
Okay, this is the last question we have for you. What do you think is the best solution to end gun violence?
I would say it's for kids. Well, we have a lot of programs around the city and lots of neighborhoods and communities to get kids more involved in school and other activities, rather than in gangs and in that lifestyle.
Yeah.
I believe that it's something that works, and getting the kids out of that way of thinking early on is really important, and definitely has its benefits in helping kids stay outside of gangs. That'll reduce the numbers of gangsters and hopefully reduce the number in gun violence. It's for sure we have to solve that issue at the very beginning. So it'll be tough, but I feel like it could be done, and it'll be a lengthy process, but it's the only way we can really reduce the gun violence in the city.
So I think the best solution is not to have stricter gun laws, first of all, because we've seen that in other countries and it just does not work. People will still find a way to obtain guns no matter what. I think the best way to end it is to somehow find a way to get all the mandem out of the gangs, Try to find a way to, move the mans around and just get people out of that gang life.
The best solution, there should be like a lot more strict government laws about gun violence, and like people shouldn't be able to get guns as easily as it is.
Gun violence is a large issue that affects many innocent civilians. The growing use of guns in Toronto is a serious issue that needs to be dealt with. It's a continuing issue that we need to address and put an end to. The city has lost too many victims to the gun violence surrounding the city. There are so many talented lives that have been cut short and so many victims who've had no part in criminal lives. We should end this conflict by coming together as a city and as human beings, putting aside our differences and overcoming our greed, whether it be for money, power, or other influential things we as humans are susceptible to. Let's stand together as a city against gun violence and take a knee together for peace, just as we've done before for BLM.